people. Another beautiful day. Yeah. Hope your five senses work. Health and strength is good. What? What's up, gamers? Look. Can the tech industry survive without video games? That answer is no. Can the video game industry survive without tech? That answer is no. So in other words, they need each other. The tech industry needs video games, and video games need tech. Okay? So the tech industry is video games, and video games is tech. Okay? The real monster behind the tech industry is video games, because video games forces the tech industry to come up with new hardware so they can keep up. The tech industry is video games, and video games is tech. Okay? Yeah. Anyway, sitting here messing with y'all. Let's get down to business here. What's up, gamers? Anyway, all right. Look, we're talking about this Sony. We're talking about this Activision Blizzard court case again. So, okay, Sony. Remember, okay, Jim Ryan. Remember, you said your goal is to block the deal, huh? And now you're crying, huh? Okay, all right. See, when this whole Activision Blizzard situation started, you guys should have been the first over there, since you got a 30-year history with Activision Blizzard. You got 30 years with them, and you should have been the first over there to find out what is going on here. Why are you guys having all these problems? Can we help you guys? Is there anything we can do to fix this problem? Did you, Jim Ryan, and Sony Corporation, did you all even do that? Or did you just care more about Call of Duty? And I could ask the same question about Nintendo too, since they are a part of the game industry. Activision Blizzard is your family member. Activision Blizzard is a part of the gaming industry. They're going through problems. So why aren't you, Sony and Nintendo, why weren't you guys the first ones over to Activision Blizzard when the situation started? Oh, you didn't care. You guys didn't care about Activision Blizzard. Or better yet, no one really cared about Activision Blizzard until Microsoft dropped that 68.9 billion, aka 70 billion. Now all of a sudden everybody cares. Anyway, listen to this. Sony believes the CMA conclusion on Activision merger is irrational. Sony, you guys are funny. You guys have the Call of Duty contract. And the reason why Activision was so successful with Call of Duty, they were consistent. And they were always adding new features to the game every time they came out with it. So every time they bring out a new feature in Call of Duty, the user base is like this, growing. Then Call of Duty now splits into two. You got Warzone, the battle royale, but then you got Call of Duty with the story, the single player, multiplayer. So Call of Duty is a two-headed monster. Or better yet, Call of Duty could be a three-headed monster. We're like, okay, with Call of Duty, with Warzone 1.0, that works on PlayStation 1 and Xbox Xbox One, right? But Call of Duty, but Warzone 2.0 works on PS5 and the Series X and S. With Call of Duty 1.0 now, you get to play the old Warzone maps, right? But then with Warzone 2.0 now. 2.0, you get to play the new Warzone maps for the Series X and PS5. So Call of Duty is really a three-headed monster when you really look at it. You got Call of Duty with the single player multiplayer, right, with the story, right, the newer one, right. Then you have Warzone 2.0, right. So that's a two-headed monster. But now Warzone breaks off into two now. Warzone is a two-headed monster now. So now you got Warzone 1.0 that works on the series Xbox One and PS4, and then you got Warzone 2.0 that works on the PS5 and Series X and S, Xbox and PC, and then you have Call of Duty. So Call of Duty is a three-headed monster when you really look at it. So Sony, now you're sitting there talking about the conclusion is irrational. Okay, so basically you overplayed your hand, like they said, and it's showing now in this article. You overplayed your hand. And the first big mistake you made in all this too, Sony and Nintendo never really cared about Activision Blizzard. They never did. But all of a sudden now they cared when Microsoft dropped $68.9 billion on them, on Activision Blizzard. All of a sudden now everybody started to show their true colors. Now they care, but before when the situation happened, nobody cared. Anyway, let me get into this here. It says here, over a week ago, the CMA published a provisional finding that concluded Microsoft's ongoing Activision deal would not pose a serious threat to the console competition. Exactly. Like I said before, just because you buy a studio, it does not stop the game industry from moving. Exactly. Anyway, because there's new studios being formed. That's why we have all these game shows. Those game shows are about awards and showing off the advancement that's been made in video games through tech. But it's also about networking and getting to know people and trying to build studios and stuff like that. But anyway, it says here, this was followed by the announcement that CMA would shift its focus towards ensuring the same for the cloud gaming market. Says here, while this great news for Microsoft and Activision, the same cannot be said for Sony. The gaming giant had recently published a new response to these findings, claiming that the CMA current stance is surprising, unprecedented, and irrational. And then it shows here, it says here in all black, it says here the CMA reversal of its position on its console theory of harm is surprising, unprecedented, and irrational. The provisional finding, and then it says in quotes, PFS, and then close parentheses says, accesses a significant body of evidence in the round to support its finding that Microsoft would have the ability and incentive to withhold Activision content, that this would substantially lessen competition by foreclosing PlayStation. That statement is false. That's foreclosing PlayStation. That is false. Remember, Sony, let me say this. You know what, let me get through this. It says here, in accessing this body of evidence, the PF emphasis consists of jurisprudence on the CMA's duty to access evidence. That it is particularly important in this case to access the merged entity incentive to foreclose by considering all available evidence in the round rather than to focus on a single method. Now, let me get back to what Sony said up here. What they say, what Sony said about, says here, access a significant body of evidence in the rounds to support its finding that Microsoft would have the ability and incentive to withhold Activision content, and that this would substantially lessen competition by foreclosing PlayStation. that statement is false. That statement is false, because just because you buy a studio in the game industry, it does not stop the game industry from moving. The game industry keeps on moving. For instance, when EA was buying studios left to right, did that stop the game industry from moving? Did that foreclose PlayStation? Sony, you got no argument. But anyway, let me keep going here. It says here, Sony continues to argue that Microsoft could still limit competition by limiting features and degrading Call of Duty. The gaming giant highlights the particular trend of performance and technical comparison from a YouTube channel like Digital Foundry. At present, games are quick to watch these breakdowns for new games to learn about the best platform. Sony believes this has led to even smaller issues being very important to general audience. Instance like minor crashing and freezing may therefore be a significant issue for Sony in such case. Addressing the subject of a degraded Call of Duty release on PlayStation, SIE CEO Jim Ryan previously said, "Our gamers would desert our platform in droves. Our business would never recover." And then it says here, the CMA is set to issue its final decision on the Activision merger in less than 3 weeks. This should be a crucial turning point in the ongoing statement between Sony and Microsoft. Oh boy, let me deal with Sony real quick. This statement that they made, let me address this. Says here, the provisional finding acts as a significant body of evidence in the mind to support its finding that Microsoft would have the ability and the incentives to withhold Activision content, and that this would substantially lessen competition by foreclosing PlayStation. Just because Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard, it doesn't lessen competition. Remember, Sony, you had shooters. Remember SOCOM, Killzone, and Resistance. You have 3 personal shooters, and in this video game industry, you have to be consistent. And the developers of Resistance, SOCOM, and Killzone, they're not consistent. In the words of George W. Bush to Al Gore, he is not consistent. Look, you have to be consistent in this video game industry. That's how you get success in this gaming industry. Okay, so this notion that it will lessen competition by foreclosing PlayStation, that statement is false, because you have a 96-4 percentage over Xbox in Japan, and worldwide it is 70 60 70-30 or 69-31. That argument that you're making, it is false. To be successful in this game industry with a game, you have to be consistent. Look at Sega with Sonic. Consistency. Look at Nintendo with Mario. Consistency. You have to be consistent in this video game industry if you want success. And when you get success, it doesn't stop. You have to continue on being consistent. This notion that Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard will lessen competition is a bunch of nonsense, because you had your own shooters, and the developers behind those shooters were never number one, they were never committed to video games. That's number one. Number two, they were not consistent with their games. Okay. Number three, they didn't stay in communication with their user base, and then use their user base to build the next game. Like what I said about Skull and Bones, when at the height of the pirate games, when Sea of Thieves, Atlas, Blazing Sail and Skull and Bones. When I saw that video, I said to myself, they need to release this game now and then use social media to build that game. And up till now, that game still hasn't come out yet. So when it comes to Sony and their personal shooters, those developers were never consistent. They didn't stay in communication is very important. Communication is very important in video games, and those developers didn't stay in communication with their user base, and listen to their user base, and then use the user base advice to build a game. You have to be consistent in this game industry, in this video game industry. If you're not consistent, your love of video games. If you're not consistent with your video games, your love of video games will cool off. It will burn out. You have to be consistent, and that's how Call of Duty got so successful. Activision was consistent, even when they fired, even when they let go of West and Zampella, they still were consistent. Activision kept moving. Maybe West and Zampella was in the way of progress. Maybe they were. That's why Activision Blizzard Activision had to let them go so they can move forward with Call of Duty. You have to be consistent in this video game industry. That's how you get success. Look at Nintendo with Mario and Zelda. They're consistent. Look at Sega with Sonic. They're consistent. Look at Final Fantasy. They're consistent. The problem, the Square Enix issue. Square Enix took on too many games that they couldn't handle. That's one of the biggest problems with that situation. When Square let go of all them studios, they took on too much that they couldn't handle. So when it comes to these video games, man, you have to be consistent. Okay, you have to be, and that's how you get success. And success don't stop. Success don't stop. In video games, when you get success, you got to keep the ball moving. That's the name of the game, man. So this notion that it will lessen competition is a bunch of nonsense. That's why we got games like Elden Rings and to take on Elder Scrolls. The game industry keeps on going, man. And you guys should have been the first over there when Activision Blizzard had their situation. You got a 30-year history with them. You should have went over there like, okay, how can we help you? What's going on here? Can we assist you guys? You need anything? Stuff like that. Did Sony did that? Did Nintendo even do that? They didn't care. Microsoft is like, okay, fine. We're gonna make you care. And they purchased Activision Blizzard. All of a sudden now everybody want to talk about they care about Activision Blizzard. Come on, man. Sony cries too much. This Activision merger doesn't stop competition, man. The game industry is like a revolving door. It just keeps going and going, man. And consistency is the name of the game. Once you build a game, and you got a user base for it, the demands are at an all-time high now. They want the next game, and the next game, and the next game, and the next game, and the next game. You got to be consistent, man. And that's how Activision found success with Call of Duty. They were consistent, year in and year out. Okay, it was another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. They just kept Call of Duty 1, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty 3, World at War, Modern Warfare 4, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Ghost, Advance, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4, Infinite Warfare, World War 2. They just kept going. They kept the ball moving. They stayed consistent with it. So you have to be consistent in this game industry, man. But to say that this will lessen competition by foreclosing PlayStation, Not unless the PlayStation user base got something to say about it. So you guys are just to me right now. Jim Ryan is just looking for an excuse right now, looking for something to latch on to, looking for something to to hold on to say like, this is going to stop the game industry. It's not going to do anything, man. But one thing about this this Activision Blizzard court case, once Microsoft purchases, once the deal goes through, and when that happens, Microsoft knows now that they are being watched. They are being watched by the Activision Blizzard fan base. They are being watched, and as soon as something happens, man, that user base is gonna be on them like white on rice. So yeah, they're being watched, man. So you don't wanna you don't wanna mess up Call of Duty once this deal goes through. Remember what happened with EA and Star Wars? How the fans responded? There's a huge backlash coming if Microsoft decide to mess around and mess up Call of Duty. If they or Activision Blizzard mess up Call of Duty, there's a huge backlash coming. So they're being watched, man. Once this deal goes through, but does this lessen competition? No. The game industry just keeps going, man. It keeps going. So to me, right now, Sony's just mad. To me they're just mad that they didn't step in when they needed to. Okay, they didn't step in and went over there like, look, man, what's going on? We got the contract with you guys. Why is all this problems happening? Can we help you? Can we assist you? What is really happening here? And that's all they had to do. If they would have did just that alone, they would have stumbled upon Activision Blizzard being up for sale or being up for grabs. They would have stumbled upon it because once Facebook shows itself in that situation, a light will probably like go off like, okay, really, you guys are trying to it's like you try to sell Activision Blizzard to Facebook for how much? Well, about $70 billion. Really? They weren't interested? Okay, we'll take care of it. They should have went over there and paid and look into the situation, man. So, if Sony would have did just that, man, they could have. They probably could have stopped Microsoft in their tracks if they would have just went over there and just look around and find out what was really going on with the whole situation. They didn't do that, and yeah. One huge mistake on their part, man. I mean, they have the contract. You got the contract, so you got to go over there now. Like, okay, we know our contract is about to expire. We need to go over here and find out what's going on over here because all these complaints are coming out the woodworks. Like all over the place. Like, okay, what is the root? What is the root of the problem here? If they would have just did that, they would have found out that Activision Blizzard would be for sale. But since they didn't do anything, all you did was just gave Microsoft the green light. And once they saw that, everything kicked into overdrive. They had to move on it. So yeah, this Sony made a big mistake here. A big mistake, big mistake. And look at their former boss over at Sean Layden. He was telling people like, oh, Game Pass is not sustainable. Okay, Game Pass is not sustainable. Huh? Okay, all right. Microsoft got Game Pass up with ZeniMax Bethesda. They just purchased them for 7.5. So everybody should have been alert. Like, okay, Microsoft is playing for keeps here. We need to stay alert. And the Activision Blizzard is out there in the open for everybody to see. The situation is out there in the open for everyone to see. And you Nintendo and you Sony didn't even step in. Yeah, Microsoft was right for purchasing Activision Blizzard because Sony and Nintendo never cared. They just didn't care, man. You know. Then on top of that, Phil Spencer on that statement that he made, like, when he said Sony and Nintendo is not our competitors, meaning that once Game Pass was up, he looked down that road and saw what was coming. You know what I'm saying? You got Tencent, you got Take-Two, you got Amazon, you got Google, Nvidia. Those are all competitors, man. Valve, they're all competitors. So Microsoft got Game Pass up. Once they got it up, they saw they know who the competitors are and how big their pockets are, and what they can do. Once that Activision Blizzard situation popped up, it was up for grabs. So they had to do what they had to do. They had to move on it, because if they didn't move on it, Tencent could have bought Activision Blizzard just like that. Amazon could have did the same to help out their Luna. Google, same thing. So yeah, Activision Blizzard was up for grab, man. So Sony, come on, man. They got to do a better job than that, man. They should have went over there. Sony, Jim Ryan should have went over there like, man, what is going on here? We got the contract with you guys. It's about to expire. Can we help you guys? Do you need any help? Nintendo should have done the same thing too. They didn't care. Microsoft was like, okay, we're going to make you care. Done. Okay? Yeah. So yeah, Activision Blizzard is up for grabs. Anyway, latest video for y'all to enjoy. Nice talking to you people again. Chris, still a Star Wars and Star Trek thing, or Dark Side